Hi. Hi, Razmig.
Hi,
I want to
Ingrid.
tempt your surname.
You gonna try?
I know.
Okay.
I don't.
Hovaghimian.
Want to try? Okay.
Hovaghimian.
Hovaghimian.
Yes. I think I was 10 when I learned it.
Okay.
It's a tough
Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Hoodline.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us what's going on over at Hoodline? Tell us about
Okay.
the company a little bit.
So, a little bit of the genesis of the Hoodline story. In 2016, I was an EIR at Rakuten. You had covered us generously at Wiki.
Yep.
Singapore, Japan, moved here. Wanted to go back to an old passion, which was news and data, and we started a company called Pixel Labs. Then we merged with Hoodline, which is the San Francisco local news site.
Mm-hmm.
We rebranded the entire company Hoodline. So what we do effectively, we take data signals and turn them into local content with a combination of editors and engineers. So think data science, think machine learning. And we're in about 20 cities today. We take about 250 terabytes of data on a monthly basis, identify the signals, and write automated stories that cover the news deserts that are out there today.
Okay, so you're doing automated news.
With a combination of editorial to set the templates and the tone and the variations of it, and data sets with a lot of triangulation and validation, so there's no fake news here, to take that to market.
Do you think you're killing off local news, or was it already dead?
Yeah, I know that question's coming. No, local news, it's been tough. Like, when people talk about the news deserts, they're talking mainly about not having sort of the oasis of information, the credible, good local information in markets. There are about 1,000 communities still that don't have them. This was about 2,000 communities that had lost their local news about maybe in the last 10 years or so. Some are starting to get filled back in.
So it was already dead?
It was starting to shrink, but what the issue that we're trying to fill is try and fill those gaps, trying to amplify the signals of the stories that are out there. And when we talk with our publishers and partners, we realize that 9 out of 10 things they want, they don't cover. They might be covering crime reports, but they want to get the beat and the pulse of a community. So data sets allow us to actually provide that data and insights to them, so they can write stories that are deeper, more journalistic. We're not a newsroom, but we identify those signals at that very bottom, at a neighborhood polygon level, if you will. And we write those stories very quickly, so we understand what's happening in a neighborhood. But oftentimes, those signals could be amplified when the newsrooms are the ones that are taking it to market. They can go deeper and add more soul to it.
Okay. I know that right now, a lot of the stuff that you guys are doing is sort of around, I was looking at sort of restaurant reviews.
Right.
Kind of local listings turned into better narratives, right?
Right.
Okay. Do you think that you might try to get more ambitious over time as your algorithms become more sophisticated and so on? So what's really missing in local news is, really hard-hitting crime reporting and, something uncovering, corruption in, let's say, a housing association.
Right. Yeah.
The stories that are, shedding light on things, maybe something that local councilors are not doing that they should be or shouldn't be. Right now, are you able to touch that kind of stuff with what you're doing, or is that the ambition or not? Or is it more about relieving some of the work that's being pressured onto local news organizations so they can focus on that?
It's actually both. So we are maybe covering about 10 or 12 different categories. So restaurant openings could be one, but it could be high school sports, it could be crime, it could be anything that's happening around you. For us, anything really with a lat and long at a hyper-local level we want to cover, but then we can go at a city level. Would love to build this data moat with all this data that's coming from the clicks we get when our stories are powering local discovery, let's say inside of an MSN or an ABC or a CBS or a Hearst. But at the same time, with the clicks and more data that's coming into our platform, I'd love to be able to find these patterns and create infographics and create sort of data sets that newsrooms can use to go find those investigative sort of reports and be able to break stories that we cannot cover.
Okay.
So we're trying to find the information in the signals and turn them into quick stories that inform, like fill the gap, because local news is big. Like 40% of searches have local intent. If you look at what's happening, people searching for what's near them, near me searches, in quotes, has gone up 400% over the last couple of years. We want to fill that gap, but we want the journalists to be able to take those data sets and stories and open it up. And my dream would be if we are at scale and we figure out the supply of content and the right unit economics for it, to open up our platform for newsrooms that are trying to write the stories, that are interested in the data sets, for any small newsroom to be able to play with that data and write their own.
Okay, so you've kind of demonstrated there's an appetite for local news, evidenced by local news searches, so-and-so near me, et cetera.
Right.
And yet, we've seen a big collapse in local news, right?
Yep.
What has failed in the business model? And what is it that you're doing that you're able to circumvent that and make it into a profitable business model? I'm not assuming you're profitable now. But
no, we're not. And when we are, I'd love to come back to you and say, we figured out a model that maybe we can work with others to replicate. It is a tough space because people are discovering their news in many different places, from your Twitters to Facebooks to whatever sites they might be on. So aggregating that demand is extremely hard. And to aggregate that demand, typically people are chasing clicks. Any story that has sort of the right headline that might get clicked on. But there are a lot of stories at a very local level that might not have those network effects. A story in a certain neighborhood might not travel at a national level. It might not ripple, if you will, to a national level. But still, it's so important. And if you add all those neighborhoods together, it scales. So we figured that there are two things we want to solve. One is the supply of content. There's so much demand, but the content isn't there. So with the data sets, turning that into content, we feel we're able to sort of fill that demand because it's there. Second is the unit economics. It's extremely hard to just do it purely from the editorial side. But at this day and age, with a lot of data that's available from the government data sets you were talking about, fictitious business names, liquor licenses, crime reports, et cetera, once you start analyzing that, you're giving reporters tools to be able to write much faster. So that brings the unit economics of writing one story much cheaper than it was, let's say, 5 years ago. So fixing supply and getting the unit economics to a level where we can make sort of a profit per story and be able to scale that is what we're going after. We're not there yet, but that's what we're trying to crack.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about like the local newspaper when I used to live in Monterey, California, before I moved to England, it was awful, and that was before the internet really hit. I'm old, but it was awful. The stories were really low quality, and I think that it was dying a death already. So I can understand if you think that you can get more interesting stuff in there.
Yeah.
You'll get more demand for it, and so on?
I think so. The more we write, we're starting to see that there are more data sets starting to come into our platform, almost 90% inbound now. And the more distribution we're getting on, let's say, the right side of our platform, the more data partners are coming. There's this weird platform network effects that's happening for us, where our bottleneck really is being able to work with all this data, make sense of it, identify that the right signals to noise ratio, if you will, maybe 2 or 5% of the stories we have in the platform we publish. So we want to get better at it. We want to understand what people are clicking. And the beauty of being able to say it's powered by Hoodline rather than Hoodline as a destination is it's platform agnostic.
Right.
We are not in a walled garden. We can be on a CNN or a Fox, right? Like the data can be anywhere, so we understand what people want in their communities.
Okay. Now, from what I understand, you guys have two parts to your business. You've got these automated stories that you're generating, and then you've got the recommendation engine. Now, the automated stories, they're running with a bunch of big media properties, right? You're working with, tell us.
So the ABCs, the Tegna, CBS, Hearst, and we're talking with others. They've been great partners, and we learn a lot from that relationship as well. So that product, we essentially have two products.
Do they pay you to syndicate your content, or?
No. So
that's totally free.
At the stage that we are in, I want to learn from the data. We want to be able to write better stories, and for us, that's distribution, to learn what's working, how we're addressing the demand, and get better.
So you're basically offering them free feeds of your automated
we
stories.
monetize our own stories. We could have an affiliate link, we can have an ad, and would love to get to a point where we can share that back with the publishers, because this can create a new revenue stream for them.
Okay.
So that's another way that can help the local publishers. So that product, where it's our fully syndicated content, we call it the data wire. Think a little bit like the Associated Press. It's almost like an AP or wire. The second product, the recommendation product that you were mentioning.
Except you have to pay for an AP feed.
Right.
Yeah.
So in this
Nobody
case,
has to pay for your feed.
In this case, we're giving great local content, and we were able to actually monetize it. So free is better because we're getting distribution, and that's how we're able to get to almost 100 million story recommendations a month now. 100 million.
Okay.
And would love to scale that. We're in 20 cities. Would love to be across all the DMAs in the US. The designated market areas, roughly, I think the top 50 are 80% of the country. The second product is a modular recommendation. Think about it maybe like an Outbrain for local, except it's not ads. It's actually content. And we get tremendous amount of clicks on these because you are, let's say, on a crime story, you see another crime story in the same neighborhood, or you're on a different type of story, we'll recommend something that's very local in your neighborhood or in your city. So that's how we're taking a second product to market. Either take the full feed or just put a module.
And then the module has like ads in it, right?
So in the stories, because since it's our stories, there is ads, but we're also experimenting with an ad, let's say, every 5 stories, every 10 stories or so.
Okay. So if you're working with all of these media organizations, obviously one of the big areas where people are going for local news is also Google, through Google Maps and just through search engines and so on.
Yeah.
So how much are you talking to or looking at the likes of Google or Facebook, which has put in a massive local news push now, Twitter?
All of them.
Likes to think of it itself as the town hall.
Yeah.
So where are you on those?
For those conversations, I think it's 2 ways. They have so many signals we'd love to turn into content. At the same time, we'd love to put the content we're generating, these automated templates from other data sets, let's say the government ones, on their platform, because it's clear that the demand is there. People want to understand local, see local. So we want to be platform agnostic. Maybe we're inside of Moments, or we're working on events with Twitter, or maybe we're in the local feed. And Facebook is doing quite a bit, actually. A lot of things they're experimenting with. So we're having conversations actually with all of them, and I'd love to be able to just personalize those algorithms to show you those 5 pieces of magical content for you in your city, and let's say within half a mile of where you are.
Is that what Facebook is talking to you about?
We're talking about multiple things. I don't want to speak for them, but local is definitely important for them.
Right. I mean, would they want... The thing is that so far, a lot of what they've done has been about partnering with third-party news organizations and trying to enable them. They seem to be pushing back on that now. If you're a publisher working with Facebook, a lot of publishers now used to get so much traffic from there. Now they're not. Would you be somebody that they would potentially partner with to replace some of that content, do you think?
I don't know if it's replacing, but if we really can, as I was saying, understand the pulse of a community and what's happening, sort of that beat is important to them. They want those stories. And we almost, in a way, if they're the social graph, we're trying to map a very hyper-local graph of what's happening around you. And those stories would be valuable. But local for them, I think the definition might be a little broader. It's not just the stories through publishers, but it's anything really with a location on it. It could be things to see, things to do, things to buy with merchants that are on Facebook. Okay.
So another kind of interesting development in local news that I've been noticing, and I'm sure you have too, is this whole idea of citizen journalism. So it's not about taking all those data sets, but about people on the ground and doing their thing. And you're seeing a lot of that coming through on Snapchat and Twitter. Big deal there, right? And Google started something earlier this year called Bulletin.
That's right. The community bottom-up news they're getting.
And it looks like, I can't quite figure it out, but it looks like it's, because it's just invite only now, but it looks like it's partnering with local newspapers and bringing in data, right, from local people to crowdsource to fill those.
Yeah, it's great to see Google put so much effort into it too. When they had their initial launch event, we were there, and they earnestly are trying.
You were there at the launch of Bulletin?
Yeah, the launch. Why? Because they were talking with partners. They wanted to understand sort of what's out there. Part of what we do also is we have a tip line. We literally have phone numbers. If you're, let's say, in Oakland or San Francisco, where we get citizens sending tips, and we can turn all the tips, let's say, on a daily basis into a template. It can be an automated template. So there is on-the-ground reporting that happens that way, and we'd love to be able to do it in other cities too. I think that's a bit of a parallel with what they're doing. They're trying to understand on the ground what's happening.
Okay, how would you work with something like that, though, as Hoodline? Because you don't currently use that in your news.
For something like that, what I would love to do is be able to take those signals and turn them into stories again.
Right.
The left side of our platform, if you will. And then across Google, there are so many other places, including possibly YouTube, because we do automated videos now. Yeah. So our templates are on videos as well as stories, articles, have distribution, just go to where the users are.
Okay, congratulations. You've just made a perfect segue into my next
I don't know how,
subject.
But sure.
Okay, so previous company, I know you, of course, from your previous startup, Vicky, which was why don't you tell us about that? It was a sort of
Sure.
video?
Viki was, if you will, a Hulu or Netflix for the rest of the world. We started in 2010. The whole premise was content arbitrage, effectively. We would license US shows, let's say, for everywhere except the US, because it would be $78,000 per episode here per year, but it's only $400 in Asia. We would do the same for Korean dramas, Japanese anime. We played with the data, just like we're doing here for news, but there it was for TV shows and movies. And we built tools for a community of translators to create subtitles for free.
Yeah.
So you can get a Korean drama in Arabic, open up the Middle East. Or you can take, let's say, an Egyptian movie, put Dutch on it, and open up a new market. We grew it, and Rakuten acquired a company. I think you covered that. You were with us from the early days.
Yeah.
And it's been great. Like Viki is thriving, and I'm not there, so maybe that's a good thing. But it's great because for us was being able to build cultural bridges, and we feel like it's really important for, through medium of content, people understand it. And 40 out of 200 languages on Viki were endangered languages. So the translations were actually one way of saving that language.
So for me, it's quite interesting because you went into online video at a time when it was really just starting to take off. I think it became really the buzzword. At the owners of TechCrunch, only wanted us to do video for a while. They didn't seem to care at all about writing. When you think about that, you guys were slightly ahead of the curve with that. You were there when YouTube was already big, but it was only set to get bigger before Netflix really boomed.
Before Netflix opened up there, yeah. In fact, we were taking our content, and our revenue model was to syndicate it back with subtitles to Netflix and Hulu.
Right.
And that's how our revenues grew, until we started aggregating that demand and having our own. Video is a medium that's just so universal now. Like, we started realizing that if we're going to be in every market, we have to ride that wave. Like, open up Latin America, open up Europe. So video was the way of doing that. And also it allowed us to grow because we created the embeddable player that travels with the subtitles.
Yep.
And 80% of our traffic was from outside. Like, fans would take the videos and embed them on their own fan sites, and they had their own followers. So there was this network effect there as well.
Yeah, and you still got the traffic from that.
That's right. They would come directly on the player, and we would monetize that player.
Yeah.
But it was a hard thing. Like, local is harder, to be frank, and maybe that's why we're doing it. But being able to convince studios that fans can create quality subtitles and put them on was extremely tough. And they're worried about piracy of licensing internationally as well.
Yeah.
It's a crazy problem.
So what were the lessons from that you've kind of applied to building the next startup, would you say? Are there any? Or is it so different that
No,
it's hard to say?
It starts with data. I think we wanted to understand. Initially, when we launched Pixel Labs, we're trying to go consumer ourselves, and we're working with Twitter's data to see if we can understand local. Like, what are the local stories? And we realized only 4% of tweets, even if that, had location on them. So starting with understanding where the demand is and having a point of view of what you're trying to solve, especially when you're market making, like, you're not sure exactly how you're going to fill that gap. It takes a lot of experimentation, and it takes a phenomenal team. I think that's the fastest way. I think we're careful here building the team from the early days, and a shout out to about 27 of them. We're in Harrison in the mission. Come say hi.
Do you think that Hoodline might ever try to tap into video itself? I mean, right now, you're mainly a written.
We're written, but we're doing automated.
Written news.
Yeah, we're doing automated videos as well. In fact, for the articles, I think we're going to get, maybe in a month or so, half of our article stories might have an accompanying video with it.
Would those be automatically generated as well?
They're automatically generated.
Right.
In fact, they're easier than the text versions. You can imagine, let's say if it's a restaurant opening, a picture of the front of it, a picture and the picture of the chef, and let's say the dish with some ratings and an exact map. And imagine that showing up.
Those are going to be sort of like slideshow type videos rather than.
There is some footage as well you can
pictures.
do. Like, we're working with some third parties where there's footage at a neighborhood level that we might be able to interlace. But yeah, it's not full video footage. But they're actually doing well with tests, and it's in high demand from the publishers.
Right.
Everyone wants more video inventory because that's one thing they can monetize, and our videos are 15 to 60 seconds. It's early, but that's an area we're focused on, and the funding will help with that.
Yeah, although I guess if you start putting in more crowdsourced data, you could create a situation where you're asking people for more video. That could become the basis of video, I guess.
That's very possible.
Yeah.
To automate that, it's to be able to find the quality segments of it. So that's where the machine learning part of our team can identify the right footage, the right images, and keep improving that.
And have you had a request for that sort of stuff from your publishing partners?
Yes, video, absolutely.
Right.
So it's pretty universal. Like there's demand for that.
So now, what is going to be next then? Is it video, or is it more sophisticated news, or what do you think?
Learning from data still, but those two products, I feel they've found a market, the Wire product and the recommendation one. In terms of content, both video and articles are important because people consume content in different ways. So those are the areas that we see interest. But the more sophisticated we get with our data sets, the more validation you can do. And the better the story, the better the algorithm. So I think going down the path where we're able to personalize it for you and recommend better stories in your neighborhood is going to be important. What I was saying, we're trying to solve unit economics and the supply. I feel we're going to figure out the supply. In fact, there might be too much supply. Like, how do we find just the right pieces of content for the users?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a kind of an interesting area because you've got the media is your endpoint here, but what you're doing is a model that is being used in all kinds of things. There's this organization, Live Stories, which is doing this with government data.
Yeah, the Civic Data in the East Coast, I think.
Yeah, I mean, is that something that you might also look at some point too? You know, not just doing this for news, but for other kinds of organizations, not just media organizations.
Yeah, if I'm
have
not
you
mistaken,
had any interest from others for it?
So I think they're aggregating the data really well at a city level. E-commerce could be possible too, because if you understand sort of where the story is, and there's something that just opened around you. We work, let's say, with Groupon's data.
Yeah.
We can talk about a deal that's right
As
around the corner.
As one example. I mean, there's very little reason to visit Groupon unless you're looking for a Groupon, but if you create more narratives in there.
It naturally bubbles up.
Exactly.
Like it's in a way almost like a local search, but in reverse, where things are showing up based on where you are. On the Civic Data point, it's extremely important, right? Because when we're talking about news deserts, even those publications that are still writing local, apparently 17% of the stories are truly local. The rest is still this national stuff that they're getting in. And the more data and information is available, the more they can start writing about their communities and their neighborhoods. So we absolutely would love their data, and that group Civic has done a really good job of mapping it and visualizing that data. And that data, the raw data, and even the infographics of it could be very helpful for newsrooms and for groups like us to make our stories richer.
Okay, something we haven't really talked about, but you come from outside of the U.S.
Yes.
Vicky had a co-headquarters in Singapore.
That's
you
right.
yourself, you're Armenian Egyptian.
That's right.
Very exotic.
With a hard name.
Yeah. Can you envision a kind of Hoodline being applicable in other markets too? I mean, it's just such a different, or is it just such a different climate in different places?
No, I think the need is there. I mean, about 10 years ago, between my first and second years of grad school, I was working with the United Nations, literally in Sudan, South Sudan, before it split into a country. And the iPhone was new around that time, and I was thinking, can you create a world map where you have stories that are not on other news outlets, not 70% the same? And that was important for me to be able to do something at an international level. And the need is there, be it in a different market, a different country. If we can have the data in those markets, the way that we built our machine learning models and the data science team is set up, if we can get local editors to work with, I think we can cover other markets. English-speaking markets would be easier. But you saw, Vicky, I started very international and then started picking the markets. This time around, we're starting in the US, going in the other direction. Right. I learned a lot in that process. Yeah. But yeah,
your algorithm is being taught.
I have to think international because news is everywhere.
Yeah, in the other countries outside of the U.S., have you had any interest yet in this sort of thing?
Yeah,
have you tried?
In Europe, Australia, there's a lot of the inbounds we've gotten, including actually Singapore. We've had interest from mobile apps where, let's say Messenger apps, where they're thinking of having like a nearby button. Literally, you click on it and see what's happening around you. You travel to another country nearby, you open it again and see what else is happening around you. Like being able to power that. But there's just, like, we have to focus. Like, we're still small, and now it's an exercise of being able to write quality local content, being able to do it at the right unit economics, then scale.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
I appreciate it.